Hello, and welcome to the Cruzbike Recumbent Bicycle Podcast. My name is Maria Parker. I'm CEO of Cruzbike. I'm here with my incredible husband, Jim. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Maria. Glad to be here.
And we're here in the Cruzbike warehouse recording the second in a series of conversations about the history of Cruzbike. A lot of people ask us questions, and also we're getting older and we don't want to forget. So we're recording some conversations about what we remember about how and why we started Cruzbike and the process of it. And today we're going to talk more about the design of Cruzbike and the history of the design of recumbent bicycles in general and Cruzbike. So Jim, I'll let you get started on that.
Okay. So going way back, recumbent bicycles, probably the first ones were built around 1895. So they were evolving with other bicycles. People were building all kinds of crazy things, some good, some bad, and they were worked out in road races and time trials and so forth, which ones were more favored as we move through time.
There was like a big wheel thing, right?
Well, yeah, there was the penny farthing, which they didn't have gears originally, right? So to go faster, you just put a bigger front wheel on.
Okay, and then just push.
And they were front-wheel drive, too.
Push harder. Oh, that's right. They were direct drive, right? Direct drive. There was no chain.
Drive, right. And so, yeah, so you were sitting perched up. The racers, the bravest people, were sitting way up high on these
like how high?
Crazy bikes.
Five feet,
several feet
4
sometimes.
feet.
Yeah. And then if they wrecked, they were just devastating injuries, broken necks and broken bones.
Was it just two wheels, like a big wheel in the front?
Two wheels and then a rear wheel for balance.
And so somebody'd help them. They'd use a ladder or something to get up there.
Yeah, they got good at it, or they used a ladder or some way to jump on that thing. So then the safety bike was invented. Do you have the 1885, was it?
Yes.
The safety bike came along?
The Rover safety bicycle by John Kemp Starley.
The Starley safety bike. So that bike was a huge advance because it had gears and it had two wheels that were the same size, and you could stand over the bike, so it was much better. And it was safer than the other crazy, dangerous high-wheeler.
Which is why they use safety in the name.
That's why they use safety in the name, yes. And we'll get back to that. But anyway, so as the bikes were evolving, cycling was a huge sport. This is before NASCAR and NFL and all that. It was a worldwide sport. And in Europe, millions of people would follow cycling, and what was going on in the cycling world is much, much more percentage then than it was now as far as people following it.
So they had their favorite riders.
Favorite riders, yes, exactly. So a Frenchman named Charles Mochet built the first recumbent that was very efficient at going fast.
And just to review, and probably everybody who's listening knows this already, but whenever I'm out in public, people ask me about the bike, and a recumbent bike is a bike where you sit in a seat versus a saddle and you pedal out in front of you. So the safety bikes were not recumbent. They were more like riding a horse. There was a saddle.
They were all modeled after the horse.
Okay.
Yeah, they were built to appeal to horse riders because when they were invented, that was what people
Right, that was the competition, right?
Yeah, they didn't have cars back then. Yeah.
And so you were either going to ride your horse or walk or ride your high wheeler or safety bike someplace.
Yes.
So it looked a little bit like a horse. And that's why today we call what people sit on in traditional bikes saddles, because it's like a horse.
Yeah.
But Moshé, he said, we don't have to do that, right?
So Moshé built a good bike. It was fast, and he recruited a cyclist named Francis Faure.
But Moshé, it's just to go, sorry, not to be too detailed, but Moché's bike didn't have a saddle.
No, it was a recumbent.
It was a recumbent. It had a seat, and so Moshé sort of broke free from this concept that it had to be like a horse.
Yeah, what he actually did was he took a four-wheel drive, like a velo car.
Oh.
Yeah, he actually saw a flash of insight where he saw a velo car with four wheels that you pedal.
That already existed?
Yes.
Okay.
And he thought, well, what if I just cut that in half and just use half of it and design a bike over that? And
so there was lots of different things. This is the wild, wild west of bicycle design back then. There were velo cars, there were safety bikes. Okay.
So anyway, he got Francis Faure to race the bike. And
who was Francis Faure?
He was a mediocre, like a B-level cyclist. He was not an elite European cyclist. He was a good, solid cyclist, but not world class.
Not known.
Not known world class, no. And that might have been a strategic mistake for the acceptance of the bike. We'll never really know what the alternative was. So anyway, Francis Faure, he set the 1-hour world record on July 7th, 1933, which was a huge big deal. And that just blew people's minds. But he was acclaimed as a hero for doing it, and he was awarded the medal and given the record.
So Francis Fowler rode Moché's recumbent bicycle to the fastest time in an hour, or the furthest in an hour than anybody had ever gone to that point in
1933.
33,
yeah.
Okay.
So he was acclaimed and he was
Yeah,
accepted,
everybody said
and it was
yay.
great. Nobody really complained, except he won another race or set another record later, and then people started to think, wait a second, is this fair? And so they had a big conference, the UCI, the Union Cycliste Internationale, which is the international body over cycling.
It still governs cycling, UCI.
It still governs cycling. They got together and they debated it, and in April of 1934, so a little bit less than a year after he set the 1 hour world record, they got together and had a big vote. And it was a very close vote. It was actually 58 votes to 46 votes.
Oh, that is close.
To ban recumbents. And basically what they did is they defined the bicycle very precisely as far as like where the axles will be, the front axle, the rear axle, where will the saddle be, where will the bottom bracket, the cranks be, where will the handlebars be. And so the bicycle was set in stone in 1934. Before that, the bicycle was undefined. The only thing that was prevented...
2 wheels, bicycle.
Exactly. 2 wheels and no fairings. They wanted people to...
A fairing is a cover that can make you faster.
Right. So that was really the only rule. 2 wheels and no fairings. And then
until 1935.
1934. Yeah. And so that's the bicycle that we have today. That
doesn't look much different.
It looks exactly the same from a silhouette point of view. The components have gotten better. The materials are lighter, carbon fiber instead of steel or whatever they were using back then. But people think that the bicycle looks the way it is, the road bike looks the way it is today because it's the best or the fastest or the safest, but none of that's true. It's the way it is today because
it was defined as such.
It was set in stone, so it can't be anything different. That's what it is. But now,
in order to race.
Now, so I want to point out a lot of Americans, we blame the French for everything, but the French aren't always the bad guys. So when the debate was going on, the president of the UCI, Paul Rousseau, actually argued to allow recumbents. He was against the ban on recumbents, but I think the influence of the Italians and the Germans were overwhelming. That's what pushed the ban on recumbents. And I want you to consider that in 1934, what was going on in Italy and Germany, there was a wave of authoritarianism was coming in. The same year that the recumbent was banned is the same year that Mussolini was elected head of Italy and Adolf Hitler was elected Chancellor of Germany in public elections. So it was a bad year for elections in Germany.
To put it in
Italy.
a different ways, people were very comfortable with rules or were seeking or craving set rules
uniformity
and guidelines.
Yes.
And so we say that recumbents were banned. Essentially, recumbents weren't banned. Anybody could still ride a recumbent, but recumbents were banned from racing, from UCI sanctioned racing. So if you wanted to race in a UCI race, you had to ride a bike that had the very specific rules and measurements that the UCI had set forth. And as Jim says, many people think, oh, well, that's the best design because it stood the test of time. It's been almost 100 years. It's not that most people race. Most people don't race. But like other things, it's when people see racers, they want to look like that, and impacts the whole industry.
I like to draw an analogy to motor car racing. Imagine if the cars of 1934, we just decided that's the only car you can race, the way cars looked like in 1934. They have to be that shape, that size, the wheels in that position, the engine there, and we'd be driving 1934 cars. The whole field of ergonomics, which is the comfort and safety of cars and bicycles and so forth, is a relatively new science. So recumbents are just much more ergonomic than bicycles. So, I often wonder, if you were just to invent the standard bicycle today with how dangerous it is, I don't even know if it would pass muster, compared to recumbents. They're so much more, cause less injury. We'll get into the studies later.
We're getting into it. That's a whole different issue. So in 1934, the bicycle was defined by the UCI and pretty much A lot of people stuck with it, but not everybody, right? Not everybody. There was always tinkers and engineers trying to create a better mousetrap. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah. So it did squash development. So in 1914, Peugeot, a huge French company, they were manufacturing recumbent bikes, like mass producing them in 1914. But all that kind of activity ended after the ban, because like why invest in this design? But what happened was later in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, small groups of people who were interested in alternative forms of cycling began having meetings and competitions. And that's where Tom Traylor, who we went out and met
in California,
and his wife out in California, and near LA, Torrance, California. And so Tom Traylor designed a recumbent bike that was beautiful and fast, and he won lots of races on it.
These people refer to themselves as aficionados of human-powered vehicles, HPV, which is not a great acronym anymore. So this is a whole organization of engineers and people interested in alternative transportation or human-powered vehicles that didn't necessarily look like a safety bike.
Yeah. So Tom Traylor got a patent on that first, what they call moving bottom bracket front-wheel drive design, which is basically the category of recumbent that a cruise bike falls under. And so John Tolhurst in Australia, he was inspired by Traylor's design, and so the cruise bike that John designed is based off the recumbent that Tom Traylor designed. Right. But John made an improvement to the drivetrain, which is patented. So there's a relatively new patent on that design based off of Tom Traylor's patent.
So to describe this for dummies like me, a moving bottom bracket. So the bottom bracket is where the cranks or the things attached to the pedals come out. In a traditional or safety bike, it's usually beneath the saddle. So you have a little tube, and then out of that tube comes the crank arms and the pedals. That's the bottom bracket. The tube is called the bottom bracket. So in a recumbent bike, and we're going to talk about why this is an advantage with front wheel drive. In the case of cruise bike, that thing moves. The place where the pedals comes out moves. And you have to learn to ride it because it feels like it's going from side to side when you first initially got on it. And we'll be talking a lot more about that. But basically, it's not hard. It's just a new skill. And Tom, as you said, Tom Traylor, as a middle-aged man and even older man, won lots of HPV races on his moving bottom bracket. We have a different term for it.
Dynamic boom.
Dynamic
front-wheel
boom,
drive.
right.
That's our term for our patented drivetrain.
Right. But other people at the time were experimenting with recumbent bikes. And the reason that the HPV community was doing that was because they were, A, more comfortable, and B, more aerodynamic. So if you were sitting in a chair and your feet were out in front of you, you didn't have to crouch to get low in the wind. But most recumbents were rear-wheel drive recumbents. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, that's just a fact that they were. So the
and what problems are there with that?
Well, there's many problems with it, but the biggest problem with rear-wheel drive recumbents, other than having a really long chain that might be 11, 12 feet long, is that you have heel strike. So if your feet are out in front of you, and you have to turn the front wheel to go around a corner, but your foot, your heel, can get caught or trapped or just strike the front wheel when you're cornering, especially if you're trying to pedal while you're cornering. And so anyone who designs or builds a rear-wheel drive recumbent has to deal with that in some way. So one way they can do it is stretch out the wheelbase. So it's a super long bike, and then they can push the front wheel so far out in front that your feet won't hit it.
It's in front of your feet.
Or you can raise the bottom bracket way up in the air so that your feet are way up high and your feet are way above the front wheel, and then that won't happen. And that has other problems. That's what some stick bikes do.
Right.
You can also make the front wheel little. Put a little tiny wheel in the front, which aesthetically and also it's not very comfortable to ride bikes with a small front wheel because there's more shocks and things are transmitted. So you have to really bend over backwards to make it work to have a rear-wheel drive recumbent. With the cruise bike, with front-wheel drive recumbent, moving bottom bracket style front-wheel drive, you don't have any of those issues. None. You can put the bottom bracket at whatever height you want it at. You can put it at the ideal height. You don't have to have a long wheelbase. You can do a short wheelbase, which is much more convenient and easy.
Moving the bike around, especially.
Yeah. So it gets rid of that huge issue of heel strike, which is great because when you turn the wheel, your feet move with it. And so that's a question we get also is, well, it's a great bike, but you can't turn with it. And well, actually, you can turn with it. At one of the recumbent bicycle conventions, they held a contest to see which recumbent could turn the tightest radius. And everybody from all the companies brought their bikes over, and the Cruzbike won that competition. So there's plenty of degrees of motion, mobility within your hips, knees, ankles,
right,
to allow cornering. And really, you don't have to turn the front wheel that much to corner anyway. It's more about leaning.
Yeah.
So it's leaning and turning. So
to go back over this, so we have the safety bike, or the standards of the bike, set by the UCI in 1934. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, a group of people, especially in the U.S., but I imagine all over the world, decided that they wanted to explore human-powered vehicles outside of the rules of the UCI. And so the recumbent bike, there's other designs, trikes, three-wheeled bikes, four-wheeled type human-powered vehicles, of course, velomobiles, which are recumbent bikes that are covered with a fairing. So this area was just wide open, and it was all about speed and comfort, because if your vision is to be able to power yourself for a long period of time, a human-powered vehicle, you A, want to be comfortable, and B, it'd be nice to get there pretty quickly. So the area was wide open. It was like the 1910s and 20s back in Europe. Everybody and his brother was coming up with a new design of a bicycle, and out of that, issues developed and were solved in different ways. And out of that came Tom Traylor's invention of the moving bottom bracket. He had a patent on it, which then inspired John Tolhurst to improve. And that's the mechanical or the structural history of recumbent bikes and Cruzbike specifically. And so once we went into business with John, what happened then?
Well, we had the Soft Rider, which was our first model.
And it was based on a
mountain bike. It
Okay.
had front and rear suspension. And it looked a lot like a kit bike, but cleaner. So it was a great bike. We sold a lot of them.
We did.
Yeah. So they're still out there running around.
They are.
Yeah. In the early company, Marie and I ran the warehouse. We had a 20,000 square foot warehouse in Lumberton, North Carolina, small town in North Carolina. And
John went over to Taiwan.
yes, he established us with a fantastic family-owned bicycle manufacturer in Taiwan. And I got to say that working with them then and now, they are master craftsmen, and they also know bicycles and they know what works. And they also assisted with design. Like, for example, the Silvio suspension system with the leaf spring suspension system.
The original Silvio.
Yeah, that was based off of
Yeah.
Johnson's Speed 1 model, that suspension system. So it was a great match.
Great collaboration.
And we're still working with them.
So then we wanted to improve the way the bike looked. One of the things that we were working on really hard was making the bike look more sophisticated. We looked at all recumbent bikes, because there are other recumbent bicycle companies out there. And we looked at the traditional bike world, and we said we've all got a long way to go in terms of making our bikes look like sophisticated, beautiful machines that people would actually want to ride. One way we did that was John worked on getting the hydroform tube.
Yes. So that was a major milestone in the development of the road bikes, basically our Silvio or S40 model, we call it now, and the V20 or Vendetta model. It was just an engineering hurdle to develop the hydroform tube specifically for our road bike versions. So
right. It took a long time. And
getting the metal the right thickness and the right
Yeah.
pressure. And so that was a major accomplishment to get that hydroform tube right.
And one of the things that we wanted to do was we wanted to form a community. We knew that it was a risk for people to invest in our bikes, because they weren't cheap, still aren't, and people had to kind of learn to ride them. But what we found was people were really excited about it once they did. And so actually the community developed itself. We had a forum, and there's just amazing, excited community of cruise bikers. And those are the early adopters. But Jim and I felt really strongly that we wanted to break into more mainstream people who weren't necessarily wanting to take a huge risk. Early adopters are willing to tolerate all kinds of stuff. Like some of those first bike batches we got in, there was, we'd be drilling holes at midnight or whatever on them. So there were some issues, but we realized that if we were ever going to be truly successful, other people would have to want the bike who wouldn't tolerate the things that the early adopters, and you all out there who are listening to this know who you are. Thank you. You've made our company. We also wanted to up our game in marketing. So we decided we would spend more money in marketing, and that actually meant hiring a full-time person to do marketing. Mostly John was managing marketing and production, and you and I were managing customer service and shipping. Mostly that was me, because you were also providing financial infusions to the company with your regular jobs. After a while, that just wasn't working anymore with our partnership with John. He wasn't thrilled with the amount of money that we were spending on marketing, and it was cutting into our profits.
Yeah, so also another big issue was a disagreement over the front suspension.
Right. We had some design and some financial disagreements, and so we decided to part ways with John. And, you know, it's hard. That was a really tough part. It was either we were going to be done with Cruzbike or John was going to be done with Cruzbike. And it took some time, but we worked it out. And we still owe tremendous allegiance to John's brilliance for starting the company. But people ask about how did it start and what happened. And so since... What year was that? 2013?
2015, we bought John out.
2015, we bought John out. Since then, it's been Jim and I and Robert Holler. John was still with the company when we hired Robert. Robert had owned a conversion kit.
Probably about the same time I was wobbling around in my conversion kit. Robert was wobbling around in his conversion kit.
And people know Robert. He does all of our assembly, most of our videos. And Robert is an owner in the company and also a brilliant bicycle mechanic. He understands bikes. He understands people. He's super easy to get along with. He's a wonderful human being and become like a brother to us.
Yeah. Well, I want to also shout out to Doug Burton, too.
Oh, Doug. That's right.
Because Doug
Doug's
is
an owner
also
as well.
an owner. He's not active now. His job got crazy, and he was constantly traveling to China and so forth. But Doug Burton, for anybody who's been with Cruzbike since the beginning, Doug was the face and voice of Cruzbike and customer service. He did a lot of work helping design and contributing to the early
safety,
Cruzbike.
especially.
So I would definitely want to have Doug Burton as an important figure in the origins of Cruzbike and how we eventually got to be the world's #1 recumbent bicycle company.
Right. And so when John left the company, it left a huge hole in design because John did the CAD drawings and design, and we didn't always agree with John's design decisions, but he was a great and brilliant designer. And so we've had different designers, and that's been good. You know, you and I have sort of had to think about what we wanted. We had Jacob for a while, and now we have Brandon. We've had others. So we've got designers. We have our own ideas. Our customers actually give us a lot of design ideas and input, and we're always grateful for that. One of the things that we've worked hard at lately, well, since 2015, we're not just trying to make good bikes, we're trying to make good accessories that go with our bikes. We're trying to provide the best customer service of any bicycle company. We work really hard at it, and now the current company is me and Jim, of course. Lucio's our daughter who does the marketing. Morgan, our daughter-in-law, who does shipping and customer service. Of course, Robert, who goes to visit Taiwan. He does a lot of the stuff that John did for us before. So we're still a really small company, but I think we've got a performing team now. So we had 4 main models. What are those main models?
Well, starting from the top, our flagship race bike is the V20, which is in the Vendetta family. You can call it a Vendetta or a V20.
Now it's the V20C.
Now it's the V20C, which is the V20 with the carbon fiber front end. The boom, chainstay, fork are all carbon fiber. Now, beautiful. It takes about a pound off the bike weight, but it's all out of the front. And so that's a great place to remove weight. And so it's our beautiful new model. So that bike appeals to people who like to go on the road and go fast. You don't necessarily have to compete in races with it, but if you want to, it's wickedly fast. Yes. Do you want me to do all 4 models?
Yeah, do all 4 models.
Okay.
Just list them out.
So then the next one down is the S40, which is also another road bike based off with the hydroform tube.
The grandchild of the Silvio.
Yes, it's in the Silvio family. It has, like I said, the same hydroform tube, but it's welded up at a different angle, so you sit more upright. So the V20 backrest angle is actually about 23 degrees to be official. The S40 is about 40 degrees, so that's how it got its name. S for Silvio, 40 for the 40-degree backrest angle. And both those bikes have a fixed backrest angle for maximum efficiency. The S40 is really targeted as a road bike for people who want to tour and be comfortable and relatively fast, or people who want to ride with standard bike riders, but they don't want to embarrass them by being too fast. So it's a great bike. It's got more places to put racks and bags and so forth. So it's a good touring bike. Then moving down to the Q45, I shouldn't say down, it's just across. It's just a different flavor
Well,
of bike.
we call the S40 and the V20 our performance bikes, and the Q45 and the T50 our utility bikes.
Yes, and both of these models have adjustable backrest.
Right.
Q45 is our only bike with suspension. It has a very robust rear suspension based off a 165 millimeter shock, which is a full-size shock. And the one that comes stock is good enough for 95% of people, but if you want to put a fancy air shock on there, you certainly can. And the Q45 is also well equipped for racks and bags. And we sell a set of 24-inch wheels, the 507 designation. It's flexible.
Yeah.
All our bikes use disc brakes, so you can actually change the wheel size on any
Pretty
of them.
easily, yeah.
On any of them. So,
Yeah.
so that's Q45. It also uses the patented front wheel drive system that John developed and patented. And then there's the T50, which is sort of our intro model.
It's the great grandchild of the Soft Rider.
Yeah.
I would call that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a nice beefy frame. It's the bike if you're interested in doing an electric version, e-assist or e-powered bike, that would be the best model
It's
because
got beefy dropouts.
yeah, it's a good bike for that.
We love it. We love the T50. It's for us. It's like a cruiser. We ride around town in it. We go to the grocery store. We go to the hardware store. We go out to eat. We put the lights on the T50 and ride it to 3 miles to downtown Newburyport or wherever.
And it's not a huge investment to get in on a T50. And so people say, well, I wish you had the kit. It's like, well, it's kind of what the T50 is.
Yeah.
Like, get the T50 frame set, and
it's the most affordable bike we sell.
And if you can ride a T50, you can ride any of them.
All right. Well, I think that's good for today. We talked a lot about the history of the design of cruise bikes. And so, but we got more coming up. So tune in again. Thanks.
Thanks.